Welcome back, Integrous Women, to Video 2, The Power of a Conversation. And in this video series, we're going to explain the importance of the power of these conversations and introduce our two practices. And as we get started here, we want to share this very moving video about the influence of your words. And if you're following along in your workbook, we're on page 12. We hope you enjoyed that video. It's very powerful to understand that what you think, what you say, and what you do does matter. And in this picture here, Maya Angelou talks about we must be careful about the words we use. Someday we'll be able to measure the power of the words. And I would actually think that Thomas Edison, in the conversation he had with his mother, really influenced how he became an inventor. What we want you to think about here is recall a critical or destructive conversation you were in. Think for a moment a time when things weren't going well. Remember we shared with you in the other video about a critical or destructive conversation, and really focus on how your body's feeling at that point. And in a few minutes, we'll tell you the importance of that. Now what I'd like you to do is just take a deep breath, close your eyes, bring yourself back to center, open up your eyes, and recall a great conversation. Perhaps you were with a child, a friend, a colleague at work, your boss. Think about a conversation that you could just feel the energy, the movement forward, the leaning in, and the excitement that you were having with the people around you. Just think for a moment about a great conversation. Now, think about how your body is feeling. And what we'd like to do next is to really talk about the importance that conversations worth having are important for your well-being and the well-being of others. Sherry, maybe we could talk a little bit about this as how it impacts the brain, our heart, our mind, and our soul.
Sure. If you're like most people in the first scenario that Jackie asked you to recall, the negative conversation, you probably felt or noticed a tightening in your body, tightening of your muscles. Your breathing might have gotten more shallow. You might have felt something in your stomach. And what was happening there is the conversation literally was creating a neurophysiological response. Our bodies are wired for two primary activities. Our brains are wired for two primary activities. One of them is to protect us and keep us alive and safe. And the other one is to foster growth and creativity and creation. But they can't operate at the same time. So that first conversation that Jackie had you recall triggered your reptilian brain, which is the part of the brain that keeps you safe. Its primary duty is to protect you. And what it does is trigger neurotransmitters and hormones that help to um, move your energy and your oxygen to the muscles so that you can flee, you can fight. Sometimes it causes people to freeze. But the overall point is you're working to protect yourself. And those neurotransmitters that are released actually inhibit your ability to use higher order thinking. And they inhibit the frontal lobe, which is where your seat of creativity is and your ability to connect to other people. And in the second conversation Jackie asked you to recall, it probably had a completely different physical reaction for you. You probably noticed your breathing, maybe you even took a deep breath and your breathing expanded. Most people find that their shoulders relax and they get a smile on their face. There's a whole different set of neurotransmitters that are being triggered by that kind of a conversation. Those are the neurotransmitters associated with love and happiness, like oxytocin, serotonin, dopamine, and they help to connect us to all of our thinking centers in the brain. So the neocortex, the frontal lobe open up and we have access to all of our higher order thinking. It's also where we can connect to other people, and that allows us to think creatively and think more about we than just me.
Sure. Can you tell us a little bit about some of the chemicals? I want to go back to the protect mode and the biochemical response of what's being released into your body that's unhealthy for you. I think you've mentioned there were 3 or 4.
Sure. There's cortisol, norepinephrine, and testosterone. Those are the 3 dominant ones. And they do, they suppress your immune system. They increase your blood pressure. They increase your heart rate. And again, those are all, if you have to run or you have to fight, you really want those in your system. But if you're just responding to stress and there aren't any saber-toothed tigers, all you've done is stress your system, and it ages you, and it also makes you more susceptible to disease.
And thank you, because I really wanted to point out that what you think, say, and do does obviously matter to your health and well-being.
And you know when you're in a conversation worth having, just like when you recall the conversation and it had that kind of positive tone, that you were engaged. You probably noticed your body got more energy and the conversation was moving in a positive direction. So we know what they look like. We know what those great conversations are like. The question is, how do we make sure that we always have them, or we have them 80% of the time? Because that's the goal, 80% of conversations worth having. So Jackie, can you tell the folks that are listening, what are the 2 practices that we suggest are ways to make sure you have these conversations worth having?
Yes, the 2 practices that we're going to be sharing with you in the next several videos is generative questions and positive framing. And generative questions are a way of asking questions that show that you're genuinely interested, you're curious, and you want to know how to move things forward. What is the best in everybody and everything in every situation? And the positive framing is, how do you take any situation, no matter how desperate, how difficult, and we're going to teach you a technique called the flip, and how you can use these generative questions. And once again, create communities, organizations, and teams that are thriving and flourishing. And I'd like to add that if it was simple, you wouldn't be here right now. If it was natural, you wouldn't need these video series. And when we say it's not easy, it's because it takes practice, practice, and more practice for you. And that's why at the end of every video series, we have more applications and journal exercises. In video 2, it's about the words that get you to connect and the words that get you into that protect mode. So if you take a look here, you can order the book online today. You can sign up for our training. We have boot camp trainings that we take people through so that they can learn how to bring this into their organizational lives. And you can download a free toolkit, conversational toolkit, that lists more generative questions, more ideas, and where you can start having conversations worth having today. And I also want to point out at the end of video 2 in your workbook, you can click on an article that was done with an interview we had with Forbes, and it was about the polarized conversations you're hearing in the media, in the workplaces, in social media today. And how can you just take it a moment and ask for a do-over conversation? And so if you click on that article, you'll get an overview of what is appreciative inquiry, the power of your conversations, as well as what these two practices mean, and how to have a do-over conversation when you're looking for a second genuine chance to make a positive impact.
Thanks for joining us.
All right, we'll catch you in video 3.